The nation holds its breath. Yes, we're there! Ireland are through to the quarterfinals of the World Cup. And Ireland do it! Robbie Keane in the significant stoppage time has scored the equaliser.
Hello and welcome to This Week Back in the Day, and in this episode we're going to be talking about Ireland's Euro 88 squad, which was picked on the 30th of May 1988. I'm Dave, your host, and as usual I'm joined by the reprehensible Martin Prendergast. Martin, how are you doing?
Yeah, all good, thanks Dave. Looking forward to covering this one.
Yep, Euro 88 is Nick has his 2002. This is my 2002 because it's much better and it's a much better squad. It is. He goes on about his golden age and his golden era. No, this was the golden era. This was a proper squad of stars, genuine world-class talent, and actually missing a couple of world-class players, which we're going to get into on this. So I love Euro 88 because that is a tournament. That's a tournament we could have won, and we weren't too far away. Yeah, 8 minutes from a semi-final, and West Germany, I think we would have been too good for them, even though that we were the away side.
Yeah, I mean, interesting tournament. Obviously, the first one that Ireland qualified for, and got to remember as well for some of the younger listeners, only 8 teams qualified.
Yep.
So it was amazing achievement to get there, which I know we'll cover a little bit of how we did do the job and get there. But yeah, look, brilliant times. This was the start of the real good times. Here come the good times, wasn't it?
Here. Yeah.
Later.
Yes, 2002.
Yeah,
doesn't shit up about. So as Martin rightly points out, Ireland had qualified for their first ever tournament. Only 8 teams went through, 8 groups, and only the winner of each group qualified. No playoff, no messing about. Ireland won the group, but it was a shaky campaign, Martin, and it only came about, our qualification, when Scotland did a favour, something we couldn't manage to do in Sofia, but they actually managed to beat Bulgaria 1-0. God bless Gary Mackay. What say you?
Yeah, I mean, look, Gary Mackay is a name. He was playing for Hearts at the time, and yeah, he did the job for us, basically sealing qualification. And I know it's something that people say. Some people kind of are a bit negative about it, saying, "Oh, well, you only qualified because Scotland did the business," but that's the whole nature of European Championship qualifiers, basically. And it was great to get a result over Bulgaria in a way, because there's been a lot of run-ins, really competitive matches with them. A lot of the dark arts have been shown. Mick McCarthy obviously speaks about it in his book, Captain Fantastic, about the 2 occasions they played against Bulgaria. There was the actual striker for them was like spat in their face, spat in Kevin Moran's face as well. So that's what was going on back then. And it was brilliant to get one over on them, really, and seal the qualification.
And Liam Brady as well in the home game, because we lost 1-0 to them. Or was it 2? No, it was 2-1, wasn't it, in Sofia? We lost. In the home game, we gave them a good hiding 2-0. But, the team wasn't the only one dishing out the hiding. Liam Brady got sent off in that game for decking one of the Bulgarian players because he was pulling out of him. And he actually turns around. It's on Green is the Colour, the great documentary from about 11 years ago on RTE. It's on DVD, by the way. You should try and find it. And he turns around and actually decks the players. And they actually have the footage. You see the arrow pointing at it. He turns around and he walks off the pitch, doesn't he? And Jack's delighted. And you hear George Hamilton, and Jack Charlton absolutely delighted with his man. Just assaulted somebody on the pitch.
That's it, yeah.
A 4-game suspension.
Brady receiving the acclamation of the crowd, but Jack Charlton obviously delighted with his man.
Just a different world, wasn't it?
Yeah, different time then, but it was competitive. The group to try to qualify, and they sealed the deal. So we're looking forward to the first Euros.
Yeah, I mean, we were a little bit tiny bit lucky, but at the end of the day, don't talk to me, and especially Owen Hand, as he was once quoted as saying, "Don't talk to me about the luck of the Irish," or Stephen Kenny. But anyway, that's a whole other subject for another day. So we'll move forward to 1988. That was all back in 1987. Ireland were due to play in Oslo 2 days later, but the squad had already been finalised on the 30th of May 1988. We were actually in the middle of a 9-game unbeaten run. And of course, Norway would make it 10 because it was a very dour 0-0 draw. Nobody wants to get injured first game before a tournament. A lot is said about, this was some sort of miracle. And we're going to get into it with the squad in a second. But just very shortly, this was a quality Ireland team, wasn't it? This had I've said at the top of the podcast, but this was a team of genuine stars, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. Like when you look through them, they're all really experienced players playing in the highest levels of Scottish and English football at the time. So
yeah,
very competitive. A lot of them are senior players within their respective clubs as well. So very experienced, and we're going on with strength throughout the whole squad. Adaptable players who could play in lots of positions as well. So yeah, it was a really good time.
It really was. We're going to go through the squad now. Actually, in goal you had 2 goalkeepers. That was Packy Bonner, age 28. He was at Celtic, of course. Jerry Payton, 32 at the time. He was at Bournemouth. Defenders, you had Chris Morris, 24. He was at Celtic. John Anderson, 27 at Newcastle. Kevin Moran, 32. God, he was 32 back then. At Manchester United. Mick McCarthy, 29. He was at Manchester City at the time. Chris Hughton, 29 at Spurs. In midfield, you had Paul McGrath, which, he played in midfield during that tournament. He was at Manchester United. Who actually, funnily enough, Ron Atkinson would quote on ITV commentary that Paul McGrath, as you would probably say, Martin, was the best centre-back of the tournament, but Jack had him playing in midfield, but there you go. John Sheridan, just a babby at the time, 23. He was at Leeds United. I think they were Division 2 at the time. Kevin Sheedy, 28 at Everton, won the left foot. Ronnie Whelan, my favourite Iron player of all time, at Liverpool, 26, a prime Ronnie Whelan. His teammate Ray Houghton at 26. He was also at Liverpool. Tony Galvin, 31 at Sheffield Wednesday. I think he just left Spurs, actually, not too long before that. John Byrne, 27 at Le Havre. He's on his midfield. I think he's more of a forward, actually. And then Liam O'Brien, 23. He was at Man United. And then up front, you had John Aldridge. He was 29 back then at Liverpool. He was the top goal scorer in English football with 26 league goals, but 29 goals in all competitions. We'll get back to John Aldridge, actually. I'll continue on. But Frank Stapleton, he was the captain. He was 31, and he was at Derby because he just had that disastrous spell. He went from Man United to Ajax, and it was a complete disaster for him over there. So he went back to England with Derby. Tony Cascarino, 25 at Millwall. David Kelly, 22 at Walsall. And Niall Quinn, 21 at Arsenal, with the entire squad with an average age of 24. Just want to go back there, like some of those names, but John Aldridge, 26 league goals, 29 goals in all competitions. He was a goal machine. I know you're not his biggest fan for whatever reason. Nothing to do with you being a Man United fan, I'm sure. But he was the real deal, wasn't he? This guy was a bona fide world-class striker. Yeah,
he was unbelievable. Aldo, I've got no problem with him, Dave.
He follows Lansing Road on Twitter, so I'm just saying.
Well, there you go.
I've
got no problem with really. And maybe the latter years of his punditry career, there's some few issues with it, and
because Man United, pundit ex-Man United players.
That's probably why. But no, but for Ireland, look, what a brilliant record. And when he got going and started scoring goals for Ireland, that was the thing. He took a while to get going, didn't he? And a bit of pressure was on him, and I think he had a goal disallowed in one game, and had gone off celebrating.
Penalty as well.
Were all laughing at him. So, he was brilliant. At this time as well, he's come up the back of the 88 Cup final, wasn't he?
Yes, became the first player to miss a penalty at a Wembley FA Cup final.
That's right. There you go.
Yeah, and just to mention, I was tit for tat. Kevin Moore, the first player to be sent off in an FA Cup final, Wembley FA Cup final in 1985 against Everton. Just saying, and he couldn't.
I know he couldn't collect his the
medal. Yeah,
like that. I know that was something there, but it's an interesting time, like remembering Aldridge for that, the penalty miss and things like that, and then obviously the year after, 89, I think he had the little spat as well, didn't he, when Arsenal won the league in the last game?
Who, Aldridge? No, what happened was he was released at. Was he in the squad at that time? I think he was sold, wasn't he? No, sorry, he was in the squad that time, yes, and he went the next season, didn't he? He went. He did go in 1989. I mean, look, after Hillsborough in April of 1989, I think that really rocked that club, and I know some of our younger fans were like, "Oh, the victims," and all this, which a couple of comments I actually have heard in Lansing Road about that, and I will say about Hillsborough, that could have happened to any North England team, and it would have been dealt in the exact same way. That was Manchester United or City or Leeds. You know, it was just the attitude of the Tory government at the time. Although Thatcher was in the middle of a managed decline of Liverpool, which did come out many years later. We all knew it though. But anyway, I digress. But yes, and Aldrich would leave Liverpool, which was it was kind of funny. This, and I know I don't mean to get so Liverpool centric on this one. There was a book I read. I think it was called The Men in the White Suits, which was about the Spice Boys. Do you remember that the 96 Cup final? And they're talking about how Kenny Dalglish was clearly a man with PTSD after Hillsborough because he was the manager that day. I think he was the player manager that day, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, for Hillsborough Day, yeah.
Yeah. He was actually, I think he retired in 1990 from playing. He was still a fabulous player. But he made some bizarre decisions, and that was one of them. And the way he treated Aldrich and got rid of Aldrich, and he went to Real Sociedad, who were a Basque region side, and were actually he was the first non-Basque player to be signed by Real Sociedad, and he's still revered to this day over there.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so there you go. Now, a class player, like really class. Now, his goal scoring record for Ireland, I think, was 19 goals, and something like a ridiculous amount of those was against Latvia. But to be fair, you know, Liverpool were playing the pass and move style of football, where he was the focal point of any move at the very top with him or Rush. Where with with Jack's style of play, which is actually more, it's closer to Klopp's style of play. Funnily enough, it was just not as a polished version, you know, a much cruder version of what, you know, the gang and press. It was pressing, wasn't it? It was put him under pressure, hit it into the corner. He holds up the play. The rest of the lads come in to attack. So he wasn't the focal point that he was. Hence why his goal scoring record wasn't as impressive. So just to explain that anyway. All right, we'll move on. Some other players of note there, of course, is Paul McGrath as a midfielder. That's a bit mad. That is Jack, though, isn't it? This is during the campaign, you got Ronnie Whelan in there as well. He played him as a left back, didn't he? And he played Ray Houghton as a right back at times. Yeah,
even in the qualifying campaign against Scotland, that's something that Mick McCarthy speaks about in his book as well. That he played, he put Paul McGrath right back, Ronnie Whelan left back, I think it was, but they were matched up against the three small Scottish centre forwards, and they just played into their hands basically, and dominated the game. So I think Jack was overall very underrated as a kind of tactical manager, because if you speak to any of the players now on the punditry scene from that time, they all say how he was very, very clear with his ideology of what way he wanted to play, and that I've heard Tony Galvin, for example, say quite scathingly in a way that all the modern media and football fans now are all praising Klopp's pressing style and things. He goes, we were doing that under Jack. Jack told us to do that, and matched up against Scotland with really four physically dominating defenders or midfielders to kind of cope with their three main little small strikers at the time, McClare, Mo Johnson, and I can't remember the other one, but they were that's how they kind of coped, and how he was very clever and adaptable. And I know it's 35 years on. It's amazing looking back at that squad and what those players all went on. Most of them went on and really had successful careers, but won a lot of trophies. That's it. I always think of, you have to put your medals on the table. These lads all were incredible careers, really.
Ronnie Whelan, European Cup winner in 84, runners-up in 85. I reckon that could have gone differently if it wasn't for the Heysel disaster, which led to a 5-year ban for English teams and a 6-year ban for Liverpool, because they were the perpetrators of it. Fair enough. European Cup winner, current league champion at that time, with Aldrich and Houghton. They'd won the league that year. Should have won the double, but never mind. Whelan, funny enough, was actually left out of that final, wasn't he? And Kenny even came up to him and went, "Yeah, you should have played." It's a fantastic mix of experienced pros, good pros, and players in the prime. Like Galvin, 31, fair enough. Wasn't as high flying as he was, at Spurs. He was at Sheffield Wednesday. His career is coming down a little bit, but still very, very good player. Stapling, of course, the captain, 31, quality centre forward during his time at Arsenal and Man United, and at times a centre back as well. Very intelligent player. And Kevin Moran, of course, 32, but he would play until he was 38. It's a very, very good team. It really is a quality side. I mean, let's just talk about some of the players that are missing through injury, through fallouts and suspension and that kind of stuff. But let's talk about Liam Brady, Ireland's arguably most gifted player at don't think there's much of an argument, to be fair. He was out with an injury. Most people think, he was suspended, so he wasn't included. He was suspended for 2 games. He did punch a Bulgarian lad, as we alluded to earlier in the podcast. That was only a 2-game suspension. The biggest issue is that he actually had a terrible knee ligament injury. It was actually a very unlucky one. I was going through my research in this, Martin, and I went back and watched it. I think he went over in a divot at the baseball ground whilst playing for West Ham. And that was actually what kept him out. And subsequently shortened his career, really.
Yeah, because there was a lot of talk, wasn't there, that Jack wasn't going to bring him because he was going to be missing the first 2 games. And yeah, but look, we also know now that he was injured as well. So yeah, I mean, look, incredibly talented player. You think of the career. I know that we've had documentaries on him and everything, but like, absolutely amazing career. And I know we covered it on the last game. I didn't realize this this week back in the day when we covered a Brazil game. That was I think that's his last goal for Ireland against Brazil.
Yeah, I mean, the goals dried up under Jack, and that's just a style of play, wasn't it? It was a squeeze out the up. We won a lot of games 1-0, 1-0. That was just, I guess Brazilians as well, which is I'm sure there's a message there. Yeah, absolutely. In front of 17,000 people and nobody watching at home on telly because they were too busy watching Derek Davis's over 55 entertainers of the years. If you do want to go back and listen to that is available on the website and the YouTube channel. Just saying, greenmachinepodcast.com, greenmachinepodcast.com. It is all there for you. Another player of similar quality to Liam Brady, maybe not as gifted as a footballer in terms of just ability, but nonetheless one of the very top players in English football, arguably the best player in English football up until his injury, and that was Mr. Mark Lawrence of Liverpool. He had to retire due to a ruptured Achilles tendon injury in 1987. It was February 1987, I think it was, or January, very early in 87. It was just after the Scotland game, which he scored in when we beat Scotland in Hampden Park 1-0. He went up for a header, Martin. How cruel was this? He went up for a header and he just landed awkwardly. And he thought, because it was Wimbledon, the crazy gang, he thought like somebody had done him. But he hadn't, and he was taken off in that game. Now, he would make subsequent comebacks, but he was never the same. And he was still in the reckoning for the Ireland squad as close up to, I think it was like April 88. And there was still talk that he was going to try and make his way back in because Jack loved him. He could play anywhere in the back 8, anywhere across defence, anywhere across midfield. And he was just so good, wasn't he? He was such a great player.
I think overall, I think he's one of the most underrated Irish players. If you read of any players who played with him, they all say how good he was. And I don't think he really gets ever considered as kind of a legend in a way, or is ever kind of considered by a lot of Irish fans for, ultimate Irish team and things like that. But incredibly talented. And you look at it, what he did with Liverpool and stuff. Yeah.
European Cup
loads and loads of trophies with Liverpool. And it's interesting actually in the qualifying campaign. I know you mentioned Heysel earlier as well. I mean, they played at the Heysel Stadium in the qualifiers, and that would have been one of the first times since the disaster.
A year later,
that some of the Irish players would have been there the night of that tragedy, and it would have been quite harrowing, I think, for them as well to go back there.
Yep, 100%. It was Ronnie Whelan, Mark Lawrence, and the next player on the injury list was Jim Beglin. He started in that European Cup final in '85. A very talented left back, a lovely man, by the way, Jim Beglin. He gets such a tough time as a co-commentator. I love him as a co-commentator. He's actually in Ireland. He gets a tough time, but all around the world, if you ever go on his Twitter, like people love this guy, him and Peter Drury, when they do the World Premier League feed. But yeah, he was injured with a horrible leg break. There's a photograph online if you want to see it. It was sustained in a League Cup game. It was a Merseyside derby against Everton. Gary Stevens actually broke his leg. It is nasty. And he never fully recovered. And he would actually retire in 1991 at the age of 27. He tried at Leeds, didn't he? He was in too much pain. He didn't really feature. He was probably too young for Jack's liking at this time. Because he would have been early 20s, he would have been 23, 24 at the time. But he would have featured, I think. He would have come forward as a prominent left back, I think, in the Ireland team. So he was another player usually missed. I believe Bob Paisley's last ever signing at Liverpool.
Oh, right. We're full of facts and stats on this one, aren't we?
I'll tell you now, definitely had my coffee this morning. And you know, the first three, all injuries. Jack couldn't do anything about those. However, the next one, self-inflicted. David O'Leary, Arsenal's record appearance holder, a legend, a world-class player as well, highly regarded everywhere except Jack. He had a fight with Jack in 1986. It goes back to Jack's first game on the 26th of March 1986. It was against Wales at Lansdowne Road. We lost it 1-0. And Mick Byrne picked the team for Jack because Jack said, look, you know the players. I'm going to sit in the stands. I'm going to watch it. I want to see how they perform. We lost 1-0 to an Ian Rush goal. Jack blamed O'Leary. David O'Leary was, Jack being a centre half himself, a World Cup winning centre half, his style was more like Mick McCarthy's. Tough, squeeze the opposition, tight to your man, that kind of thing. Where with David O'Leary, he was more of a modern style, wasn't he? He was more of a passing centre half. Very cultured, played out from the back, which was the complete antithesis to what Jack wanted. So he blamed him for the Wales goal. And then we had the Icelandic Triangular Tournament, which was in the close season of 1986. Loads of players are missing. Loads of players pulled out, i.e. the Liverpool players. And O'Leary wasn't in the original squad. So O'Leary went, all right, I'm off to book a holiday with my family. This is before the day of, mega rich footballers. They earn a good wage, but not like, comfortable wage, but not exactly retirement money at that time. And he had booked a holiday with his family. Jack rang up and said, listen, all my other players have pulled out. I need you in the squad. And O'Leary went, no. Good luck to you. I booked a holiday with my family. My family comes first. See you later. And that was it. He wouldn't feature in this squad, and he wouldn't feature in Ireland squad until post Euro 88, and that was a 2-0 loss to Spain in Sevilla, which actually was because of massive injury withdrawal as well. So, that's four massive names there, Martin, isn't that we're missing?
Yeah, unbelievable. If you look at those four players and their careers and how it's all turned out for them, and even the part they've had to play in Irish football history, what a miss they are. Like you would think, God, how did Ireland cope at the Euros without them, basically? But we did, and and that's the job of the manager. You got to cope with, injuries, obviously, but also these, a lot of the players coming in to Jack's style of football weren't going to toe the line of what he wanted. Again, like quoting Mick McCarthy's book. Even when the players used to love doing little kind of rondos, it would probably be called now keep ball and things. Jack hated that because he didn't want them looking after the ball and keeping it and stuff. He wanted them just doing the simple thing. Get it.
He wanted the ball in the opposition half.
Yeah,
he wanted the ball in the opposition box, around the opposition's box, really.
Yeah. So he says that I don't want you doing it now because you'll start doing it in games, which is outrageous in a sense of playing football, but. He had his ways and it was successful. So who's to say he was wrong?
True. Looking at some other players on the periphery who probably would have gone with the squad, but maybe not played. Jerry Daly, he was injured. The first ever goal scorer of the Charlton era, by the way, in a 1-1 draw with Uruguay. Just saying. Charlton's second game. Davy Langan, an absolute gentleman to boot. We've had him at Risk London many times, Martin, haven't we? Really quiet man. He, despite playing in 4 qualifiers, wasn't selected in Euro 88 squad, and he didn't take it very well. Bless him. He did say at the time, "I can never forgive Jack for the way I was left out." That's a quote. He would actually though retire from subsequent injuries the following year, but he wasn't even in the second. Sorry.
Amazing player, Dave Langan, and what he did for servant for Ireland and different clubs he played with and stuff, very much came through under Brian Clough, didn't he? And for younger listeners as well, go back and have a look at what he did and how he was as a player, very forward driving kind of fullback. But again, this is a time where sports science wasn't fantastic. We didn't know how to cope with injuries and stuff. And sadly, I think Dave Langan's one of the most, it's in a way almost criminal how he was treated with his injuries and stuff. He was basically injected to get him on a football pitch and to hell with the consequences. And it basically made him, have a real struggle in later life then physically. on mobility and wise and stuff. And
Yeah,
it's a great shame. Yeah, it did. Yeah, like his book's amazing. But I mean, he still got struggles sometimes, Dave, and he's a really nice, unassuming man. You know, you wouldn't even know that he played for Ireland if you met him. So, you know, and it's probably sad in a way that a player of his quality didn't get the kind of the day in the sun as Euro 88 would be for some of these players now who we associate with, you know, making that squad, even going on to 1990, some of them, you know, considered Irish legends because of that. But Dave Langan, I think, was one who probably did deserve to be there.
Yeah, I mean, no disrespect to John Anderson, who, you know, Chris Hughton was obviously back down to 22-man squad. So it was literally, you know, your first 11, your second 11. That's it. That, you know, it was we're still in very much old football these days. Now it's like 50 people, whatever. The kit men, you know, get a medal now these days. But Chris Hughton was obviously the first choice left back. Fair enough, no arguments there. John Anderson was the second choice. But even as third choice, Davy Langan wasn't even in the reckoning at all. Steve Staunton, in fact, he was only 19 and hadn't made a league appearance for Liverpool at the time. Apparently, he was going to make it on a plane to West Germany instead of John Anderson, but Anderson managed to beat the registration deadline by a couple of hours, pretty much, recovering from an ankle injury. So I'm not being funny. I mean, John Anderson never featured at all. Chris Hughton played all the games, all 3 games for Euro 88. I mean, John Anderson was always a favourite of Jack's, wasn't he? 'Cause he knew him at Newcastle. That was Jack's previous job until he retired in 1985 when he walked out in the club because, you know, the fans sort of turned on Jack, which was sad. But surely Davy Langan should have been there over someone like John Anderson.
I would have thought so, and it's a shame that he wasn't, to be honest. And
but
that's it. That was Jack's loyalty in a way to the Geordie. Yeah,
and that's no disrespect to John Anderson at all, who I've never met or have ever witnessed play for Ireland. Another one who was in the reckoning was you talk about names that get forgotten about. Mark Kelly, only 18 at the time. He was considered too raw to travel to West Germany by Jack. But Jack did say at the time that, you know, look, they've got a massive future. Him and Stan have huge futures ahead of them in Ireland. Kelly at the time had actually been hailed by his club manager, which is Portsmouth, Alan Ball, World Cup winner, Jack's teammate actually at the 1966 World Cup. He did hail him as the next George Best after a series of exciting performances. Unfortunately, though, Mark would retire after a series of injuries, never fully recovering from an knee injury sustained in 1991. Yeah, he played the game against Yugoslavia. We won 2-0. One of the warm-up games at Lansdowne Road. There's not a lot of footage about, unfortunately, because games weren't shown live back then, not until 1989. Friendly games that was. But did you ever get to see Mark Kelly in action? I heard he was phenomenal, genuinely.
No, he had the name basically, and yeah, you could, obviously at this time as well. It's interesting, like Alan Ball. You know, you have to remember the coverage of football here wasn't massive at this time as well. You know, we had Match of the Day in England and probably shown on a little bit of highlights, probably on RTE and stuff. But you know, you didn't have Sky Sports News running, you know, what they're eating for breakfast every 2 minutes. This was so, you know, like players coming through, you kind of really had to know your kind of stuff and your own interest and see what was happening. Do you remember that? I'm not going to digress, but do you remember that club call thing? Remember years ago, club call, where if you wanted interesting, this was a phone.
Oh, the phone line.
Set up. Yeah.
Oh, right.
It was set up by it was set up by Tony Incenzo. You probably follow him on Twitter. He's a big Ireland fan.
From Tala, yes. He's from just down the road from where I'm from.
Yeah, massive QPR fan, Tony Incenzo. So he was behind, I think, the idea of club call, which was a kind of premium phone line, Dave, back in that time. I know you probably rang other ones, but this was just about football. This is just for the latest football news, basically. This was like your club's own Sky Sports News coverage. And it was someone on the other line saying, you know, for example, Man United, it would be like, oh, Kevin Moran is out or he's always negotiating his contract or whatever it would be. It wasn't like now. So when you back to that, you know, and that was a time when a lot of the media coverage of players, anyone coming through, they were always looking for the new George Best. That was the thing. You know, anyone who was a very bright, promising young player, he was always hailed as the new George Best.
Quick question on Club Call. Did you ring that often? Did you?
Oh, a couple of times probably in the late 80s. Yeah.
I say your parents are very disappointed that you weren't ringing porno lines.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
come on.
But now, yeah, I mean, and that was obviously the time of another thing. And this is the age of football at this time is quite innocent. And you know, this was like the time of teletext as well. So you had teletext was where you had to see facts, yeah. So you'd have to wait for the scores to come through for your team and waiting for it. It wasn't like Sky Soccer Saturday now, where a goal goes in and you go to a pundit.
Do you know what? No, and it was kind of special, wasn't it? It was like, I know we won't spend too much time, so we'll be here all day. But I remember when Eric Cantona, and people will, you know, of a younger age will really struggle to understand this, but I remember only finding out, and I was well informed at the time as a kid with football. I used to get all the match shoot magazines. World Soccer was the Irish version, and I remember finding out about Eric Cantona's transfer from Leeds to Man United, literally by opening up the Daily Mirror, and go, what? That was how we found out about these things. Yeah, just mad. Different world.
Innocent time. Yeah, innocent time. And again, it's important now in the context of Euro '88 is, you know, I think, you know, the country hadn't really got behind Ireland going into this. You know, the attendance is, we were basically, you know, even our last qualifying campaign, not massive attendance because people thought the opportunity had gone to qualify. So a lot of people weren't behind the team. You know, they flitted in and out of supporting Ireland and stuff, but we had qualified. And, you know, these players who were going through here and talking about the squad, their names will forever now be, you know, etched on the public.
It's so funny because even when I was looking at a video that I forgot when I put stuff up on Lansdowne Road on the Twitter feed and all that, I do it in block form. I try to get as much, it's all done but manually. So mistakes are made, unfortunately, which you get ridiculed for. And one I forgot about was a 3-1 win over Poland. One of the last ones anyway, before we set off for West Germany. And there's hardly anyone in the ground. Yeah. We qualified.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just crazy. The Brazil game, 17,000. Remember that? The FAI, you know, arrive early, but we're going to, you know, avoid disappointment. We're accepting cash on the gates, lads. Just a couple of notes of interest here. Frank Stapleton, he almost had his career ended, Martin. We could have been missing another big name, and our captain, actually. He had to have spinal surgery in October '87 whilst at Amsterdam, Ajax of Amsterdam. He had a ruptured disc. He suffered it in training. That could have been that could have been 5 names we could be missing there.
Yeah, also injuries as well. Yeah, I mean, another good player, very underrated, I think, Stapleton. People forget that he had early days was at Arsenal, won the FA Cup with Arsenal, didn't he, against Man United, and then went to Man United the year after, I think. So, amazing.
Never won a league, unfortunately. And Kevin Sheedy and John Anderson were not fit to play Norway in the warm-up game, which was 2 days later. And funny enough, actually, Sheedy wouldn't play against England. To quote Brian Moore, Sheedy was not match hard. Actually, that's the word he uses, actually. And that's going to be... that's an episode coming up actually very shortly. Not the next one, but the one after. We're going to be talking about the Ireland-England game. 35 years, Martin. 35 years. It's hard to believe, isn't it? But we're going to be kind of focusing on the ITV version of things with the commentary and the pre-match and all that, which would be very interesting. But anyway, for this particular episode, we're going to leave it there. Martin, thank you very much for coming on. Thank you very much for listening. If you liked what you heard, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please head over to Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And also you can go over to greenmachinepodcast.com. That is the greenmachinepodcast.com. And if you wish to support the page, you could buy a shirt and you can buy a badge and sticker set over there as well. Very much appreciated. Anyway, that's all we have time for this week. See you on the next one.